The evening seemed strangely quiet, almost too quiet, as if Jesse's house itself was holding its breath for something inevitable. Thomas, who had woken up that morning with a heavy stone on his heart, had not expected any change. But the call from Jessie had disrupted everything. Her voice, trembling but with a kind of cold determination, sounded through the receiver as if she were reading a sentence. "Dad wants you to come to dinner tonight. He says this is his last chance to make things right." He shuddered inside. His heart pounded harder, everything flashed through his head, the angry look of Jesse's father, the mocking words he had said last time, and the feeling that his eyes were undressing you, looking for the slightest weakness. But this time, something was different. Too suddenly, too unexpectedly, he changed his tone. Thomas felt that this was not just dinner. This was either a chance or a trap. "Are you sure you want me to come?" His voice was breaking slightly, though he tried to keep his balance. "I don't know, Thomas. But if you don't come, he'll say you're scared. And, maybe he has a plan we don't know about." Her words were like a blade sliding across the skin, not immediately painful, but leaving a cold trail. At that moment, Thomas realized that there was no turning back. If he didn't go, they would lose before they even started. If he did, he risked finding himself in the very center of the storm. He had been preparing all day, running through dozens of conversation scenarios in his head, imagining how he would respond to provocations, how he would look straight into the eyes of the person who had already decided his fate. But with each hour, with each breath, the tension became almost physical. It seemed to him that the very air in the city was saturated with the expectation of something important. When evening came and he approached the house, the windows were lit with a soft warmth, but there was something unsettling about the light, like before a storm, when the sun is still shining but the wind already carries the smell of a thunderstorm. Jesse's mother stood in the doorway. Her gaze was different than last time, less cold, but no warmth either. "He's in the living room. Waiting for you," she said, looking away as if tired of being between two fires. Thomas took a step into the house and felt every nerve tense. He wasn't just waiting for dinner. He was waiting for a test on which the future of his love depended. The air in the living room was thick, as if old grievances had been dissolved. The wooden table, covered with a clean white tablecloth, looked almost festive, but there was no joy in this celebration. The candles flickered, casting shadows on the faces of those present, and these shadows distorted the features, making them even sharper. Jesse's father sat at the head of the table, slowly pouring himself a glass of wine. His movements were calm, but his eyes were cold and watchful, as if he were observing a test subject. Thomas sat opposite, feeling the older man's every glance pierce him. Jessie sat next to Thomas, but even her presence could not relieve the tension. "So you decided to come after all." His father said it as if Thomas had already lost the game before he even started. "I came because I think we should talk." "Jessie and I," Thomas began, but was cut off. "You're with my daughter." "I already know that. What I don't know is why I should think you're worth her." The words fell on the table like stones into water. Jessie's mother, who had been silently setting out the dishes, paused for a moment but said nothing. Her gaze slid between the two men, one she had raised and the other her daughter had chosen herself. "Worthy? Maybe it's not that, it's that we love each other." Thomas's voice became firmer, although inside everything was clenching with fear of saying too much. Love is a good word for those who don't think about the consequences. His father slowly raised his glass to his lips, but did not drink. "Are you willing to sacrifice everything for her? Are you willing to be left with nothing if everything goes wrong?" Jessie finally spoke, her voice trembling, but there was determination in it. "Dad, it's not your right to decide who's right for me. You don't even try to understand what he means to me." Her father slowly set his glass on the table. The silence hung like before a thunderclap. Then he spoke quietly, but so that every word pierced Thomas. "I see in him a boy who will either break you or break himself. And I don't know which is worse. At that moment, it became clear, this dinner was not about reconciliation. This was a duel, and every move, every word could become the final argument. The tension in the room was so thick it seemed like it could be cut with a knife. Jesse's father slowly pushed his plate away, as if he had become indifferent to dinner. Thomas, trying to hide the trembling in his hands, held his fork, but he didn't even touch the food. Jessie ran her fingers along his hand under the table, a light touch that should have given him strength, but it was hard for her to keep calm. And suddenly, in the silence, a voice that no one expected was heard. Jessie's mother raised her head, her eyes shining and burning with determination at the same time. She rarely intervened in arguments, but now something inside her broke. Enough. Her voice was quiet, but it had more power than any scream. You've spent years trying to decide for everyone what's right and wrong. But today is the first time I've seen your stubbornness destroy your own daughter. The father slowly turned his head to her. Fury flashed in his eyes, but he remained silent. The silence was more dangerous than any words. You look at Thomas and see only the fears that live inside you. But I see the way he looks at Jessie. I see that he is ready to go to the end, even if it is the end for himself. Thomas looked up at Jessie's mother, not believing that he was hearing these words. Something warm and painful at the same time pinched in his chest. Jessie squeezed his hand tighter, and he felt that for the first time that evening he was not alone. You may be strong, but true strength is not in chasing away everyone who seems weak to you. It is in giving a chance. And if you don't do it now, you will lose her. These words fell on the table like a final warning. But his father suddenly leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table, and he said through his teeth. Lose it? If he stays, I'll lose her forever. Because you don't understand. The air in the room became heavy, as if it had suddenly lost oxygen. Jessie's father slowly pushed back his chair, leaned forward, and, without taking his eyes off Thomas, spoke. His voice was quiet, but there was such tension in it that every word cut like a blade. You think I'm just an old man who doesn't understand the young? You're wrong. I see right through you. I know people like you. You come into someone else's life, promise the world, and then leave behind only ruins. And I won't let my daughter be destroyed. Thomas clenched his fists under the table to keep his anger from escaping. He wanted to answer, but he could see that Jessie was on the verge of tears, her eyes were shining with suppressed tears. Jessie's mother tried to intervene, but her father only raised a hand to silence her. You don't know what you're dealing with, boy. You can't handle the pressure of our family. You'll break. And when you do, you'll take her with you. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. And then he said a phrase that hit harder than any scream. You may love her, but she's just a temporary stopgap for you. The words hung in the air, cold and inexorable. Jessie abruptly pushed back from the table, her chair scraping against the floor with a loud clatter. She looked at her father as if she were seeing him for the first time in her life. How could you? Her voice was breaking, but she didn't let herself cry. You don't even try to understand what he means to me. And you know what, Dad? It's not him who's ruining my life, it's you. Thomas felt his heart pound in his chest. He knew this was no longer just dinner. This was a turning point. There was no turning back after those words. The table, where they had been sitting a few minutes before, was now a silent witness to shattered illusions. No one touched the food, the plates were still almost full, but no one seemed to notice. Jessie stood there, her teeth clenched, her fingers trembling, and her eyes gleaming with rage mixed with pain. Thomas sat motionless, his shoulders tense, his gaze fixed on his father, as if he were trying to keep himself from exploding. His father slowly rose. His shadow fell across the table, and this darkness seemed to swallow up the entire space. He raised his glass, which had a few drops of wine left in it, and, looking at Thomas, he said almost in a whisper, but so that everyone could hear. Do you think love is all it takes? No, boy. When everything falls apart, love won't save. And she'll stay here. Without you. Jessie took a step forward, her voice breaking into a scream. You're wrong. I'll decide who I stay with. And if you can't accept that, then maybe I shouldn't be here at all. These words fell on her father like a blow. His face tensed, his hands clenched into fists. The mother, who had been silent all evening, suddenly grabbed her daughter's hand, her eyes begging to stop. Jessie, please. Not now. But it was too late. The air smelled of broken trust, and every word only deepened the abyss. Thomas stood up, looked at Jessie, and in his eyes there was everything: anger, fear, despair, but also a willingness to fight. If this is your last chance to stop us, he turned to his father, you just lost it. He took Jessie's hand. But for a moment they stood before her parents, and in the silence only the rapid beating of their hearts could be heard. And then the door slammed, leaving behind a dull, pitiless sound that seemed to echo throughout the house. Only her father remained in the room, standing motionless, and her mother, who quietly bowed her head. At that moment, each of them understood, there was no turning back. The night in the city seemed too quiet, but the silence was deceptive. A storm raged inside Thomas, every memory of dinner coming back in sharp flashes, looks, words, pauses that hurt more than screams. He sat in Jessie's kitchen, leaning against the cold countertop when she came in, carefully closing the door. Her face was tired, but her eyes were burning with the emotions she was trying to hide. You understand that this was your last chance, her voice trembled, but not with fear, but with the anger that was growing with every minute. And instead of even trying to hear us, he made an enemy of you again. Thomas looked up, his hands shaking slightly. Jessie. I can't pretend that this doesn't hurt. I tried. I chose each word so as not to offend him. But it seemed he had already decided who I would be for him. She moved closer, leaning on the table, as if trying to keep her balance in this emotional chaos. What scares me most is that he might convince my mother and my entire family that we are a mistake. Thomas looked away, and at that moment the silence became even heavier. Maybe they already think so. But do you know what I realized today? He looked up, his eyes shining with determination. I'm not going to back down. I will get through this, even if I have to fight for us every day. Jessie stared at him silently, feeling this certainty mingle with her own fear. She knew that tomorrow would be a new round of struggle, but would they have the strength to go through it together? The air in the room was heavy, as if before a thunderstorm. The open kitchen cupboard door swayed softly in the draft, and the dim light of the lamp cast long shadows on the table, where plates of untouched dinner still stood. The smell of the food, which remained cold, seemed a bitter reminder of how quickly this evening had gone to waste. Jessie walked slowly from one side of the kitchen to the other. Her bare steps were quiet, but in this silence even they seemed sharp. Her arms were tightly crossed, her fingers digging into the fabric of her sweater, and it seemed that she was trying to contain the storm within her. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low, with metallic notes mixed with pain. Thomas, you say you are ready to fight, but do you understand that this fight could take everything from us? These are not just words, these are my family. My blood. And if they finally turn their backs on me because of you, I don't know how to live with that. He sat at the table, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clenched into fists. Fatigue pulsated in his pupils, mixed with invisible rage. Then, as if someone had struck a string, he stood up abruptly, and the chair scraped loudly on the floor. Do you think it's easy for me? His voice trembled, but it wasn't fear, it was a suppressed anger he had never learned to hide. I feel every look they give me, every judgment, like blows. But I'm standing here because I love you, Jessie. And if I step away to make life easier for you, it will mean I've given up on us. She stopped halfway. Her eyes, large and wet but sharp as a blade, stared at him. She looked as if his words had cut through her protective armor, but she still tried to keep her tone even. "But sometimes. I'm afraid your stubbornness will break us faster than their hatred." The words hung in the air like a stone over an abyss. The silence became so thick that even the ticking of the clock on the wall could be heard. Thomas didn't look away, but his heart was pounding like a drum in the darkness. He took a step toward her, slowly but surely. The step was harder than any words, because he knew that a little more could create a crack between them that would never be mended. "Maybe you're right," his voice dropped to a whisper, but there was still steel in it. "But if we break now, we may never be able to pull ourselves together again. And then we will lose not only love, but who we are." He saw her swallow heavy air, as if she was trying to swallow not words but a whole ball of emotions. Her shoulders were shaking, but she stood straight, as if she was afraid that if she relaxed even a little, she would fall to pieces. Jessie looked down. Her fingers slowly opened, her arms fell to her sides. It was a small, almost imperceptible change, but Thomas knew it meant she was no longer fighting him, at least not for now. For the first time all evening, she allowed herself to take a step toward him. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. Her voice trembled, and there was so much fear and pain and love in those 4 words that Thomas felt as if they had fallen between them, like a thin thread that could still hold them both from falling into the darkness. He raised his hand and gently touched her cheek. Her skin was warm, but he could feel her heart beating beneath his fingers. "Then hold on to me," he said, barely moving his lips. "Even if the whole world screams that we're making a mistake. Because I'm ready to stand against them all if you're by my side." She didn't answer with words, only closed her eyes and pressed her forehead to his chest. Their shadows merged into one on the wall, and perhaps for the first time in a long time they felt that even in the midst of a storm, a place of peace could be found.